our consultant has met with our community ambassadors to really look at that geographical extent and to make sure that we're connected with the community groups who are tracking this project. We've done work with staff, and now important is our last meeting coming to the Leadership Council to engage with you all on concrete metrics that we can use to anchor our project moving forward. So really looking forward to that conversation today. And the first thing we're going to do in terms of our goals is we're going to talk about some regional updates. So that's tagging back to the action that we took on the Catalyst money and talk about what's come out of that. Like I mentioned, we're going to develop these key metrics of success and really excited to get to the point where we're really advancing those. And then finally, we're going to talk about some important state updates. There's been some new action by the state in the economic blueprint that they released, as well as implementation funds that they're advancing at the state level that we have the opportunity to participate in. So we'll give an update and talk about that. So that's some of our meeting goals for today. When we look at our agenda on the next slide, it's going to follow pretty much that order. We're going to take our routine actions. We'll talk a little bit about those regional updates. This interactive collaborative session on metrics development, that's why we've kind of put you all in clusters of 4 or 5 people. There's going to be a lot of engagement with each other on that. And we're going to take about 90 minutes to go through that exercise. And we're going to provide those updates about the state implementation. As always, have time and space for public comments and go ahead and close this out. So again, really appreciate your time this afternoon. I know it's very valuable, and the fact that we can all get together to talk about this, you know, what's going to anchor this big regional project and how we're going to all move together forever or move forward together is such an important part of how we manage this regional action. So with that, I will turn it over to Gretchen to move us through our first action.
Thank you, Evan. We go to the next slide. We will begin by taking a vote to approve last month's meeting minutes, which you received in the meeting packet last week. I'll note that there was an amendment made to correct the list of abstentions in one of our votes, and that version is now the minutes reflected on our website and in the shared resource folder. So since we are in person today, instead of putting your vote into the chat, I will ask you to raise your hand and hold it while I count. So we'll start off with those who support approving the minutes with the amendment correction made. Please raise your hands. All right, now I'm gonna test my counting skills. Thank you. All right, and if anyone can live with the approval of the minutes, please raise your hand. Anyone who opposes? And lastly, any abstentions? With that, our meeting minutes for last month are approved, and we can move on into our regional updates. All right. We can move on to the next slide. So coming out of our last Leadership Council meeting, we have announced the funded projects for round 1 of Catalyst. If you scan this QR code, we have a page on our website that goes through the entire portfolio, and you can read more in detail about what will be happening with each of these awarded projects. And all in all, we awarded $5 million to 11 of these projects in the region, spanning a diversity of sectors, including biotech, clean energy, food and ag, and precision manufacturing. And a second $4 million round of funding is anticipated to release this year. And on the next slide, we want to address some of the action items that came out of our last Leadership Council meeting to ensure that this next round further advances how we meet our regional goals. So to go over these points, $4 million is available for the second round of funding, and we were able to confirm that through the contracting process. Organizations that were not funded in the first round have already received or are in the process of receiving constructive feedback on their applications. Application language is being refined to better curate a collection of proposals that meet our regional goals. And we're exploring making a free grant writing workshop available either before the second round or early after the application opens. And I believe that wraps up our regional updates. But we wanted to make sure that out of the last meeting, since there was a lot of discussion of improvements that could be made, that we address those and make those changes.
Question. I'm just curious because I am getting asked, in my community, I thought, and I may have the amount wrong, I thought originally the amount to be released in, phase one was gonna be somewhere, it was either around 6.3 million. And so I'm getting, questioned about why we only gave 5.1 million when there could have been another project or two that could have been funded.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we did note that we would award up to 6.5 million. And as we went through the process with the leadership council of scoring, we really realized that we wanted to maximize the amount of funding that was in round two. So the pot stays the same, you know, we still have $9 million of funding total. And the advantage of funding a little bit more in round two is that communities have more time to develop applications. We've had the opportunity to give some feedback. We're going to be offering some additional technical assistance. And so we feel like that will be a good pathway to maximize engagement and create the best pathway to success for our projects.
Question about the constructive feedback process. Could you let us peek behind the curtains a little bit, like how you're gonna be doing that? And what the steps are, when people might be notified about how they can improve?
Things like. So for the constructive feedback that we're providing to unawarded proposals, what we're doing is sending each of them what section of the application was their lowest performing through the evaluation process. And then also a high-level summary of comments that came from our reviewers to indicate areas of the proposal that could use improvement. Questions?
There was a negotiation, and I'm not sure if you're done with that for the first round, but what was you said 5 million. So did you pull money from other places to make sure that everybody was at 100% capacity of their requested budget among the first round? Or how did that end up working? Because a lot of us had concerns about the money going to certain projects.
We did through individual negotiations, find the opportunity to save about 200,000, because I think we were at about 5.2, because of that feedback to get us at least to that $5 million mark, or that remaining $4 million to circulate. So that was really through negotiations.
Thank you all. Next up, we've conducted our pulse checks for your questions and engagement. Next up, I want to introduce Nader, who will be guiding the next large portion of our agenda today, which is an interactive collaboration session to help us evaluate or to develop metrics of success for the We Prosper Together initiative. So I'll pass it off to Nader.
Thanks so much, Gretchen. It's great to be here. I just want to make sure that we have a prepared question or.
We have to.
Can I use my clicker? Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
No offense to
You're great at cooking.
That means you're a professional.
I'm going to do another introduction, which is someone who some of you may already know. Kyle Bryant was part of our leadership council at one time as part of the Sac Metro Foundation.
She's now with Luminari Partners, and she is going to be doing the contracts management portion for us. So once contracts have been initiated, she and her team are going to be working with those contracts to make sure that they stay on target, and also depending on the metrics identified here and through this process, ensuring that funded partners are meeting those metrics. So really excited to have Kyla back in a different capacity. It was helpful that she knew something about the super complex endeavor, because it's really hard to explain to those who haven't been involved, so.
All right. Sounds like we're gonna rely on Chester, which is great. All right, good to meet everyone. I was supposed to start at 1:30, but it's actually late. I'm Nader Afzalan. I teach at Berkeley, and I've started my own firm focused on the kind of activity that we are going to do just today. And until a few months ago, I was working at the governor's office, and until about a year ago, I was actually part of the Jobs First program. So if you do not like the program, this super complicated program, absolutely blame me. Talk about that later. Today, Chester, if we can go to the next slide, please. We have a packed agenda, and what I would love to do today is to.
Do you want to use the microphone just to make sure everyone can hear you? Okay.
To get focus as much as you can. The kind of activity that we're going to do usually takes about half a day. We're gonna do it in 9 minutes. And we totally can. So, I'm gonna start with a very brief overview and introduction and a few simple questions. We sent out the survey last week, and thanks to all of you who responded to the survey. If you haven't responded, that's totally fine. This is why we're here, and we're going to have this conversation going through almost everything. We're gonna talk about the survey responses. We're gonna have breakout discussions. Then we're gonna have a report out, a little bit, maybe around 10 minutes for break, because mine probably is gonna be at that level of peak of explosions, so we need that break. And then we're gonna come back, vote on the metrics, and wrap up and have the next steps. Are you with me? It's only. Just a go. So, raise your hand if you have ever struggled to define what success looks like in a project. Like, how many of you have experience? So if I almost all of you, if you can look at the next slide. How many of, raise your hand if you have worked on a project where success was very clear from the start? It's encouraging, like about 25%. That's perfect. Can we look at the next one, please? Raise your hand if you've ever been in a situation where you thought the quantitative metrics didn't tell the full story of the impact or the juice of what you wanted to get. Thank you. This is why we're here. We are often working on particular projects. Sometimes after 6 months, we do not really exactly know what the numbers are. And what will success look like? And this is not only about the Jobs First program, it's about all kinds of projects that you also know them. At the end of the day, we're not going to jump up and down and say, oh my God, yes, we do have all of those metrics of success, but it's going to be very clear about what your priorities are and what you consider as success. We're going to talk about both thresholds. For those of you who have responded to the survey, you already know about them. Like there's thresholds and targets that define success for us as it relates to, do we keep Oh, I thought you kind of, you look like someone who wanted to say. No? Okay. Equity, job quality, and climate. So we're going to talk about the threshold for those three key components of the program. And then we're going to look at some metrics that we have identified as metrics that we can use to track the success of the program. And we're basically going to ask you to discuss and rate those metrics individually. And then discuss them in your team. Report back. And then we're going to vote on them. By the end of today, we're not going to finalize any of those metrics, but we're going to look at the priorities and understand what your priorities are. So that's what we're doing today. We can go to the next slide, please. This is what we have done. We have started this project over 2 months ago. We organized meetings, different types of activities, and identified what the intended outcomes of this amazing program is. What is it we want to get out of this? What's the juice of all of these activities? We have spent all of this time and money and resources. What is it exactly we want to do out of this? So we have identified those ones. We're going to talk about them today. And also, we have discussed what is it that we provide? What is it that we do? And how we are going to get to those outcomes. So next slide. We started with reviewing the documents about the program and everything that you guys have been doing. We've had workshop 1, really without a vision of creating strong strategies team. We had workshop 2 ambassadors to get their thoughts on what success looks like. We have designed strategies and metrics, and to be very fair, to design those strategies and metrics, we had to design particular strategies that can help us operationalize all of these parameters. At this moment, we have a broad plan. Implement plan. We need to go down a few steps and figure out what those strategies are. Strategies to design metrics and etc. This is where we are today. Leadership Council workshop. It's our last workshop, and then we're going to have the deliverables, and we're going to talk. And in about a month from now, you're going to see the deliverables, which is metrics and strategies. If you can look at the next slide, please. These are some of the activities that we have done. A lot of interaction, visualizations, and interactions. Based on the activities that we have done, the main impact that we want to get, this is what we have identified: equitable access to high quality job opportunities. So there's been a lot of conversation about the role of climate, around the role of industry clusters. Based on these conversations that we've had so far, the main impact that we have defined again is the equitable access to high quality job opportunities. And this is going to be guiding our thinking around metrics that are going to define success for us. We have identified, for example, what the main activities are. For example, we prosper together team, which includes you all. It's not only just our vision, it's the community ambassadors, the stakeholders involved. We're providing workforce training and support. We're supporting partnerships. We're getting engaged in policy and advocacy, and also we support some different processes. And when you go down, this diagram basically shows what are the kind of things that we do to get to this ultimate impact. There are other variables of this, which is a lot more detail, but I don't want to get into that. You're going to see those details in the document. Sure, if you look at the next slide, please. Let's dive into the survey responses. But I'm just putting thoughts here. I just want to know if there's anything there you want to go. Well, perfect. So survey responses, next slide, please. We got 10 survey responses, and in fact, we got 11 last night. But the last one is not included. That was like after the hour. We're still going to include that in the whole announcement. Deadline. Next slide, please. We asked about a few things. The first point that we want to address and understand was about targets and thresholds. To understand if something is working or not working, we need the targets. So for example, let's say we have funded an amazing workforce training program. Know if it's working. And someone just asks, like, is it based on
Number of jobs, I mean, for people that still have jobs.
Great, so. Let's think about equity piece just to get more. How do we know if it's been implemented equitably? The information on the applicants. Let's say we're looking at Wyoming, for example. How do we know if we have attracted enough in the training program? This is exactly why we're here. Great. And we do need a threshold of saying that, well, maybe 40% or maybe half of those who were involved in this training should be from underserved communities or disinvested. And if it's more than half, we cheer and say, oh yes, we were successful, but if it was just 10%, we can assume that this was not a successfully designed program. So this is why we're having all these targets and thresholds. And these targets and thresholds apply not only to the metrics, but also they apply to targets, to strategies that we design. They can even apply to how we allocate funds to particular. They can focus on metrics, thresholds and targets for metrics today, but it's actually the use cases for them. Can we look at the next slide, please? So, those of you that responded to the survey, you have seen it already. Our proposal is to follow Justice 40 guideline for the equity threshold. Justice 40 guideline was designed by the White House about 3 years ago, and which was basically saying that 40% of the benefits of certain federal funds should reach disinvested communities. They designed that 40% based on several internal conversations and stakeholder engagement activities that they've had. And when we started designing the program at the state, we followed that guideline as well. So this is also what we are providing with the We Prosper Together, that the threshold for equity would be 40%. Again, if we are going back to the whole idea around training, if 40% of those who are involved in these training activities are from disinvested communities, we're passing the bar. If we are engaging more, right. But if we are going to be below 40%, we're not meeting the equity expectations of the program.
And this is the item for discussion.
Yes.
Get to know what we decide. This is
Perfect.
a starting point for discussion.
Thank you. Yes, these are the items for conversation and discussion. That was a great collaboration. Thank you. Next slide, please. And based on the equity target responses that we have got, a lot of you have mentioned that equity should be incorporated to all aspects of the program, and this is our proposal as well. And some of you were even saying that we need to consider a higher threshold. Can we look at the next slide, please? On the climate side, our proposal was to focus on avoiding harm. This program is not a climate resilience program or climate reduction program. The program is very much. And our proposal is to focus on avoiding harm. So as long as the project is neutral and not harming the environment, it's passing it on. Of course, projects that are resulting in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, that would be perfect. But that wouldn't be a requirement. Why? Because a lot of these projects are not necessarily climate projects. Again, just if you go back to some of the partnership projects or even the training projects, they're not necessarily supposed to reduce greenhouse.
I just want to take this a second and say, about the what is being provided for you today with this threshold conversation is a starting point for discussion. Nothing's been decided. So when Nader is using the word "are," I just want to be careful about that because we're really coming to you to help us figure out what it should be. We haven't decided anything. That based on the survey, these are some starting points for the threshold discussion. Later on, we're gonna get into metrics and you'll have the opportunity to rate the metrics at your tables and have those discussions. We'll take a break and then we'll have an opportunity for folks to vote on that, but we're really hoping to end today with you helping us construct what those metrics should be. So again, this is kind of a starting point for discussion. And as soon as Nader goes through this kind of threshold part, we're going to have tabletop discussions about it and share out about it. So you can feel free to agree, disagree, suggest something different, whatever you think is appropriate. So again, nothing's been decided. This is the starting point for the conversation.
Thank you. So based on the survey responses, and again, we sent the survey to idea, so I can't 100% response rate, but based on the survey responses, the no harm rule makes sense to most of you responded. Job quality one is very interesting. We at the state of California tried to define job quality. It's just too complicated because of political reasons and also some of the tools that we have access to in terms of understanding what the living wage is. Our proposal is that these jobs should provide self-sufficiency wages, and these are the wages that are It should provide healthcare benefits, and our proposal was to look at predictable hours and ask if all of these ones make sense. Next slide, please. And thank you for your comments. A lot of you had ideas about wage. You were agreeing that some sort of threshold makes sense. Some of you were saying that we need more flexibility in terms of wage gaps, especially in rural areas. For health insurance, we didn't get any particular comments, so. We crossed it out. A lot of you were unsure about this. And if you prefer to bring it back to conversation, we can. But at this moment, we felt this is a little bit out of focus on what we want to get, especially based on the responses that you got from you. So these are our proposals in terms of thresholds, and again, all of these are listed in the handout that you're gonna get in a few minutes. We also asked about metrics of success. We asked you to clarify. We asked you to rate 18 different metrics in 4 different buckets. One bucket was focused on prioritizing workers. One bucket was focused on employment access.
how we got to these buckets, it was based on the workshops that we have done, and also the plan goals, and also the state requirements and goals as well. So if you look at the next slide, please. Among all of those buckets, the one that was like very easy to understand that this is really crucial for you, and by you, I mean those 10 people who responded to the survey, is number one, prioritizing workers in disinvestment. That seemed to be a core value and the kind of thing that you're very much interested in tracking and measuring to see if you are going in the right direction. The second one was, not surprisingly, increasing access to employment. And the third one was about unlocking high quality jobs with priority cluster, sector clusters. A lot of these ones overlap. Some of the metrics that are included in increasing access to employment could be included in other ones, but at a high level, the main ones that we have realized are important to the survey respondents is like number one. Can we look at the next one? And based on 2 workshops so far and 2 surveys that we have done so far, well, what we have been observing is that climate has not been like a top priority. And this is based on the workshops that we've had so far and the surveys. Climate has been something to consider, but not the goal, but not like the juice of. You should expect seeing that the whole documents next month. I'm going to pass it off. Evan, thank you so much. This was amazing. I understand making decisions in like 90 minutes is really not easy, especially on a complicated program like this, but I think you all did great. Thanks.
Well, not really, but thank you for all your work. This is not easy to herd all the ducks in the same direction as we're thinking about metrics. And I want to thank everybody in the room too. These aren't easy topics to get your brain around, and it can be arduous to do it. I believe this is a really important part of our project as we're moving forward with specific programs and implementations, as well with our long-term goals for this program. We really want to be able to operationalize our goals into concrete changes that we're able to track and see in the region. And so this is really the foundational groundwork to be able to do that. So I really want to thank everybody for that. We're going to come back to you with this kind of turn around this feedback from you and from the other groups that we've talked to. So you'll see this again, I think at our next leadership council meeting to approve and then to add any more details. And we had a good idea at our back table there about really making sure we understand how this is integrated into contracts and other processes and products moving forward. So we'll make sure that, that we're able to facilitate that conversation. But thank you again, everybody, for your time on that. And with that, I think we can go to the next slide. All right, I want to talk about what's going on at the state level program, because there's been a lot of significant activity in the last 3 weeks or so. So what happened about 2 or 3 weeks ago is the governor announced 2 things. One was the state economic blueprint document, and that really is the strategic framework for this whole program and more. It really represents how the state of California is strategically thinking about inclusive economic development across the state of California. And so it's a really bulky document of, I think, 150 pages or so, and it really goes into a lot of detail about how California is thinking about empowering regions, being inclusive and being competitive in a global marketplace. And then the second piece of that is the implementation phase. So he also announced this phase of the project, the implementation phase, and the release of $125 million statewide to support ready-to-go implementation projects, as well as tribal funding opportunities, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And these 2 things really go together, and I think this is an important note as we think regionally about how we fit into the implementation phase. The state blueprint, the strategic plan from the state, and the implementation fund are really 2 things that are completely connected to each other. And then our regional effort around the catalyst phase and the planning effort is related, but it's not exactly the same thing. So I'll clarify more about what that means, but I wanna make sure we all kind of understand how this implementation phase is situated in the state of California overall and how we fit into it. So let's go to the next slide, please. So, actually, let's go back, I'm sorry. To talk a little bit of the detail about how the implementation phase works. And what you see on this slide is some language from the actual RFP that they released. But I'll just kind of speak more informally about how we're interpreting what it looks like. So, of that 125 million the state has released, I think they're releasing about half of it right now. So they're expecting to fund out maybe 80 million or so. This is competitive across the state, and they are inviting coalitions to submit portfolios of projects. So that means they want to see a portfolio of projects within a particular sector, and they want those projects to be ready to go and to be transformative to that sector. It can be within a region, or it can be across a number of different regions. It's not necessarily bound by these regional separations that the rest of the project has been. And then they also have some specific sector guidance that they're giving us, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But that's a little bit of just a framework of what this implementation fund looks like and what the opportunity looks like. And now we can go to the next slide. So 2 rounds, like I said, so the first round about 80 million, that's happening this year. They have 3 different phases to it. First is a notice of intent, which is a 1-page letter for each coalition that's submitting a portfolio of projects. That gives an idea of who's that coalition and what are the really high level descriptions of what those projects are going to be, and that's due at the end of this month. The second one is the pre-application, and that is a more detailed rundown of the projects, and it also requires a letter of endorsement from your regional coalition. So that would be our leadership council having the opportunity to endorse any projects that are happening within our region. And then the full application is by invitation, and I think it's by project, and if you're on my team, please correct me if I'm saying anything wrong. So I think what they'll do is if they see a portfolio of 8 projects, they'll say, oh, projects number 1, 3, 7, and 8, we're gonna invite you to a full application, and then you'll have an opportunity to get funded. So that's kind of the process the state is doing in order to start to cultivate the projects they want to see. Next slide. All right, I think you all have seen this map before, and hopefully you can kind of see it from your vantage point as LinkedIn, but this is the strategic framework from the state of California, and this is kind of where, when I say our regional project intersects with the state's project, this is kind of where this is playing out, because this strategic framework has to do with sectors from across the whole state of California and how they're categorizing them, and in a minute we'll talk about how they're kind of prioritizing them. So when we look at the strengthen, that's really representing sectors in our economy statewide that are historically strong sectors that we must, continue to maintain and grow in the state of California. I would say the strengthen category is less of a focus for the state, at least right now in this phase, than the accelerate and vet. And those are the 2 categories that they called out specifically in the RFP for their focus for this round of implementation funds. And so these accelerate and vet sectors include things like aerospace, defense, clean economy, life sciences, and you can see all of them here. But these are in the accelerate area. It's where we have assets in the state of California, but we're really actively trying to, they might be a little bit more emergent, and we're really trying to grow our capabilities in this space. And then vet are sectors that are more on the new, kind of on the new emergent side of what we want to grow in California. And then underneath you see this anchor, and these are the foundational enablers that enable our economy to grow by creating the supportive systems that people need to find opportunity and be successful in the economy. And you can see it includes things like childcare, healthcare, et cetera. So this is the strategic framework, and the accelerate and vet categories are really the categories that the state is most focused on. Next slide. And then to narrow it even more and make it a tiny bit more complicated, within the blueprint, the state has identified the sectors that in this round 1 that they see an opportunity to grow and focus some attention on. And what we have taken from that is that, like we as in Valley Vision in our region, is that these are the sectors that are competitive in the round one funding. So if we want to submit, anybody who wants to submit would be wise to submit within these particular sectors. And they include ag tech and farm equipment, life sciences, semiconductors and microelectronics, space defense and satellites. And of these sector pilots, our region has identified 3 of them as 3 out of 4 of our key sectors. So that's good for us because we have a high degree of intersection with the sectors that the state is most enthusiastic to fund right now. We have, so since this dropped about 3 weeks ago, there's been a lot of organization and conversations and things going statewide. And we've been parts of conversations across all 3 that we have here in the region about how we can be involved in advanced projects. So on the ag tech and farm equipment, there's kind of a statewide project identification process going on right now. That's looking for those types of projects across a number of different regions who identify that as key sectors. In the life sciences space, I think it's being led by Northern California, bioeconomy type focus, identifying projects across the state, and we've been in conversations about how our region can participate in that. In the semiconductor and microelectronics space, this is where we believe that our region has an opportunity to lead an application that will support the market in our region, and will also pull in a couple of our adjacent regions. And let's go to the next slide. So this is about kind of our perspective on a regional play. We think that we're really well positioned to advance a highly competitive application in the semiconductor and microelectronics sector pilot space. And we are actively identifying a portfolio of projects that could help support the components of that application. And that's the next slide, I think, that goes over what those categories are. Some of the reasons that we think this is competitive for our region. First of all, it's one of the pilot sectors, and it's one of the pilot sectors that our region has been most notable in terms of the visibility from the state over the last year or so. So we've gotten some good indications from them that they're looking for our leadership in this space. There's been a lot of momentum, a lot of new company starts that have happened in this space. We also think we have a lot of potential to point to a high quantity of high quality jobs in this space, and we already have some training institutions that are working on that. The last thing is really looking at where are other regions that we can connect to within this sector. And one of those is certainly the Bay Area, for whom we have a lot of workforce mobility connectivity with, and has a lot of assets in this space too. So, you know, we're thinking that there's a very competitive application that really seizes on those mutual assets that we have, and to elevate how we can build a stronger talent pipeline, a more inclusive talent pipeline, and bring more business starts and successful thriving semiconductor and microelectronic businesses to the region. Let's go to the next slide. So as part of the application, they're looking for 4 categories to fulfill. One is ecosystem support. So this is really that backbone support, but it's also supporting businesses like small business, doing the market research, helping really hold the whole thing together within the region. Number 2 is infrastructure. So looking at what is the specific infrastructure that we need to be successful in the sector that we've chosen within our market. So that could look like buildings, it could look like business infrastructure, that kind of thing. Third, workforce development. So making sure that we're creating skills training and employment support. And then finally, anchor activities. This is really looking at those foundational enablers, so support systems that enable people to participate in the economy and address barriers to job creation and job acquisition. Let's go to the next slide. So actually, I'll pause if we go back a slide. So that is some information about the implementation fund and what our thinking is about it. In our identification of projects right now, we're definitely looking for input, looking for people to contribute to that, so invite you all to think about that. And would love to hear any questions or comments that you have about the implementation fund or the approach that we're suggesting. Absolutely, yeah.
I'll have ideas for you.
Okay, great. Well, one thing I do want to, again, go back to this idea that the state process is not the regional process. And and really acknowledge that a semiconductor play is a stretch for our whole Lake County region to feel like they can participate in. And so we're kind of balancing the tension of that, but also thinking about, okay, how are we then filling gaps with the Catalyst Fund? What are we doing to make sure there's workforce branches that are going out across our 8 counties? And then what do we want to think about for round 2 for our region, and what is the state going to lean into next that would be really responsive to the conditions in our region? So I just want to acknowledge it's not a perfect solution, but we believe it's our most competitive move for our region, and that we have a good chance of bringing in up to $25–30 million for our region in this space. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Next slide, please. So in addition to announcing the implementation fund, they also announced the Tribal Economic Opportunity Fund, which is up to $15 million statewide to support tribal-led economic development. I would encourage anybody in this room, if you have connections, thoughts, ideas about that, now is the time to develop it. It looks like we're missing our link there, but we can follow up and make sure that you have a link to that RFP this slide now. Next slide.
Question about the tribal, is it only like
Anyone on the team answer that? I don't know the answer.
I don't think it's only federally, but I need to make sure, but I think or you're nodding also, Gretchen, right? It's not just federally, right?
I also.
And Nodder agrees. Okay, so we think it does not have to be just federally. That's 3 out of 3.
Yeah, and we can follow up with that with the link or the answer. Okay, any other questions, comments? All right, I know the implementation fund, and this is a whole new phase of the project, so we're going to be sure to continue to come back to you all. And we will have an opportunity, like I said, our coalition has to endorse any of those pre-development letters that go in, and so that's a moment where we will all engage on that as well. Next slide. All right. Gretchen, any public comments?
Look, there are no members of the public joining us online virtually. There was. Not at the moment, so no public comments.
Next slide. I think we're getting there. Final remarks, questions, closing. All right, well, just to reiterate, thank you for being here. I know we have a small but mighty group here today. This was a deep dive, but super important, super necessary for the projects and your input and having your representation from your expertise and insight from across the region is really important in the process. So I want to thank you all so much. We will be in touch with all the various follow-ups that we have noted, and I believe our next scheduled meeting is in April. Online.
Yeah.
Online. Yeah. Okay. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
I was walking up, I saw like that beard thing outside. I was like, whoa.